Captain Redman here, Grindfest Outdoors, St. Paul, Minnesota, do-it-yourself waterfowl. We got 34 days left until Minnesota waterfowl opener, so we're getting prepared. All right, so today we got a Beaver Dam Mud Runner 5 to 7 horsepower kit. I'm putting a Predator 212, and we're gonna be doing the install. I picked this kit, honestly, because I contacted a few different places. I ended up on the phone with Robert Milner from Beaver Dam, and I really like the guy. He's a duck hunter just like you and me. He seems authentic and honest, and he kind of talked me through what he thought I should do for my boat. I'm putting this on a Beaver Tail Stealth 1200. So this is the install video. I'm going to put some links in the description below. You can find some of the other videos. Feel free to subscribe. That would be great. Let's get going. Okay, so here's our Predator 212 out of the box. It comes with a key zip tied to the PTO. We're going to go ahead and take off the key that came with it and set it off to the side. We're going to take out our own key and the bolt that's going to be used to connect the shaft adapter to the PTO. Here's the key that comes with the engine itself. I'm going to slide that on there. Now in the instructions it says if the size is 5/16, tighten with 8 foot-pounds of torque. If the bolt size is 7/16, tighten with 12 foot-pounds of torque. The bolt that came with this kit is 5/16, so we're going to be tightening it to 8 foot-pounds of torque. I'm going to take this size of our shaft, this side of our shaft adapter, and if you can see how there's a key slot in there, that's going to line up right here with our key and our shaft there. This is a 1/2 inch head. I do have to use a socket extension. So I got a 1/2 inch. This is a 3/8 inch drive socket. I'm going to be putting it on initially with my wrench here, and then I'm going to be tightening it down with the torque wrench. Set my torque wrench to 8 foot-pounds. You know, the cylinder head is turning here. I'm gonna have to. So the engine turning is preventing me from torquing this to spec. So I have a crescent wrench that I'm going to attach here to my first part of my housing, or my adapter assembly. And I take my torque wrench with my other hand. Try to see if we can get one click out of here. That's it. We're going to take the second half of this, the black end, we're going to screw it in. And we have 2 crescent wrenches here. This first one is going to go here. And in the instructions it says to just tighten. There's no torque specifications, so I'm just going to go with what I feel is best here. I think that to find a socket to be able to torque this properly is, I don't even know where I would get one of those. That seems pretty snug to me. Take my marine grease, Lucas oil, fire in the hole. So next it says we're going to fill our gold coupler here 1/3 of the way full of grease. So I'm going to do that. I'll be right back. I'd call that about 1/3 of the way full. So next we're going to be attaching this gold coupler here to the engine itself. You just slide it on. And if you're going to use the screws that came with, they look like this. I went ahead and I got the longer ones with the lock nuts and the washers. I'm going to be putting those on. I'm going to get these things on. Started with my impact, but you can attach it. You can use your ratchet or whatever. Switch over to my torque wrench. So it says 10 to 15 foot-pounds. I set it at 14 foot-pounds. We're going to be installing this gray shaft supporter. Apparently this piece was not in the initial pictures. It's a fairly new piece. And so to do that, we're going to have to take out these two bolts and this one right here on the side. First, we're going to take out this little 10mm bolt on the left. This is a part of the old design, and apparently we're not going to use it, and you don't have to reinstall it. And then these top two are 19mm. You can use your wrenches or whatever you'd like. We're going to install this shaft supporter. It slides in just like this. Reinstall these two bolts, but we're not going to tighten them down. My guess is this 10mm bolt here we're going to have the option of putting back after we slide the shaft inside of this housing. So we're going to install the shaft into the coupler. Hard to know exactly how far we're supposed to put it in here. Let's see if we can pull them. So when I turn the motor, I am getting the shaft, internal shaft to turn too. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten it down here. I'm going to put thread locker on these bolts here. You don't need a lot. As you screw in the nut onto these bolts, the thread locker is going to fill the airspace to give better adhesion. That prevents it from rusting and also helps them to not back up. So yeah, we're going to go to 20 foot-pounds on these 19mm. I'm going to reinstall the screw that we took out of the side of the housing here. I'm just going to put a little thread lock on it. I'm going to set this at 15. Next, we're going to be installing the ZERK fittings. If you look at your tail section, there will be 3 pieces of masking tape, under which are taps for M6 ZERK fittings. So we're going to be installing these ZERK fittings with a 7mm deep well socket, or you can also use a 7mm box end wrench. The instructions warn not to over tighten these. They don't indicate the torque specifications, so I contacted Beaver Dam. Unfortunately, they didn't have the answer for the specific torque, so I went ahead and decided I would guinea pig this. I didn't break anything off, and I found that 65 inch-pounds of torque seems to be about adequate. I don't anticipate losing any of these, but they did supply 3 extra. I'll show you how to install the other 2. To install the prop, first we're going to remove the tail nut. This is a 19mm. I'm going to use a 19mm deep well socket. You could also use a crescent wrench or a box end wrench. We're also going to remove this locking washer. The steel sleeve is sometimes shipped with. We're going to go ahead and remove it, and you can discard that. So if you'll notice, the drive shaft here is tapered, and the prop is tapered as well. Small end and the large end. So we're going to make sure that we line up this keyway with the key. Followed by the locking washer and the tail nut. This is probably an important place to use a little bit of Loctite. I went ahead and ordered another one of these tail nuts. I have another longtail kit, and the tail nut is not a standard size that you can get in the US, so I'm not sure about this Beaver Dam, but we'll go ahead and get this on there with a 19mm. And the instructions show to just install it until this locking washer starts to flatten. Looks to be good. Let's put the engine mount together. We got the swing arm and the base assembly. These are 1/2 inch. Just unscrew them. In the diagram and the instructions, it shows that this is already together, so I'm not sure if you get the 13 horsepower kit. Maybe it comes that way. Make sure you remember what order you... So if your kit already came with these installed, you don't really have to worry about it. Mine didn't. They were separated. So keep in mind, so the engine's going to be mounted up here. There's 4 different mounting holes to help you balance out your engine on your boat in particular. I'm going to make a guess, and I'm going to go with the 3rd on my boat, but you can always take it apart and rebalance it later on. So keeping in mind, since the engine's going to be mounted up there, we want the swing arm like this. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this around to make it easier to install. Same reverse and back here. So we're going to do a little trick here. Take this thing, flip it upside down. So we're going to pause on putting the motor onto the motor mount, and we're going to set the transom up. I'm using the ones with the cups, and they just screw on and off. My motor is going to be mounted to the boat like this, so I want my bolts going in this way. We're going to take this transom mount and go mount it on a sawhorse. Tighten it down. Once it's on your boat, you'll back these up like that to secure it from backing out. Remove the 27mm bolt with a crescent wrench, boxing wrench, or a socket. Now we do have a ZERK fitting on our transom mount, but I'm just going to put a little bit of grease on this to kind of get it started, just so it slides around. Put a block of wood on here to keep it somewhat level. This sawhorse is built up a little bit high, but so I've put a block between the motor mount and the sawhorse, and I've also propped up the tail section to try to keep this as flat as possible. Put a little bit of blue Loctite on. And our washers, lock washers, and 1/2-inch nuts. I'm going to screw these down but not torque them yet. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. Take off the pieces of tape. We're going to snug these up using a 1/2-inch box end and a 1/2-inch crescent. Torque specifications are for 25 to 40 foot-pounds. So I set my torque wrench at 35. And I'm using a 3/8-inch drive. So you're going to pick how you want your handle mounted. The fortunate thing is this is a curved handle, and so it can be mounted for standing or sitting, dependent upon your setup. With my rig, I like the idea of mounting it on this side. My seat is a little bit offset in my boat, and I'm initially gonna set it up like this and see what I like. You can always move it around. We'll take a little bit of blue Loctite. We're just going to pin the handle down where we want it. Torque specifications are 14 to 18 foot-pounds. I set my wrench at 16. We'll take our Loctite again and just add a little bit to the base. Screw down these 17 millimeter nuts. You can use a 17 millimeter crescent, or you can use your crescent wrench or a 17 millimeter box end if you have it. It's just going to help hold it in place. Now the instructions actually have us setting up our throttle cable and our throttle lever before we put the kill switch on. However, if we run our cables through the handle, we are not going to be able to put our eye bolt in. So I'm going to go ahead and put the eye bolt in. This handle did have it pre-drilled. In the instructions it says you might need to drill a hole, but on my handle it doesn't have it. So we're going to put it in here. This is where you run the throttle cable through. I want to run all of my wiring for my kill switch as well, so I'm going to open this up to 3/8 using the Master Force drill. We're going to run the wiring harness. I got this from Beaver Dam. I did have to bend this just a little bit to fit it in there. I didn't want to have to open up the hole anymore that I needed to. Take the guts out of our throttle cable here. And lube it up with your favorite gun oil. See, up here in Minnesota it gets cold. My other motor I did not put any oil on the inside here, and I could tell it started sticking in the very late end of the season. And run the throttle cable down through the handle. You can also zip tie it, but why zip tie it when you can put it through the handle, in my opinion? Makes it nice and clean. We will install our squeeze type throttle. Just take it apart, add some Loctite, get it where we want it. We're going to be using a 10 millimeter wrench. You do have to put some pressure on this to compress the foam, so I'm going to use a box end to start it off so I can push my thumb against it. We're going to twist this to open up this slot so we can slide our cable through. And we're going to bend it, and it's going to pop right up through here. Close it down. This will lock in there. We can adjust this as we need to. So the instructions have us taking off this plastic part to get at this throttle assembly. You do not need to do that. You just need a socket extension, and we're going to be using a 10 millimeter socket. this bolt here from the factory comes really tight, and that's going to inhibit the spring action of this for the cable to return back to where it's supposed to be. So we're going to unbolt this. We're going to take some oil. This is liquid wrench, but you can use any kind of penetrating oil or WD-40. And I'm going to tighten this back down, but only to not past the point in which it keeps this from springing back how it's supposed to. Because I ran my throttle cable through the handle, I'm going to have to bring the cable around the front. Feed the cable through this section and use a Phillips head to loosen this. And clamp it back down, but don't crush this thing, because if you crush it, the cable won't be able to move through. Hold this guy in place with a 10mm wrench and use a Phillips to open this up. Feed the cable through the hole that's in this nut here. Grab yourself a set of pliers and hold on to this cable. Pull it as tight as it goes and screw this back down. It's going to pinch this cable down and keep it from sliding back. Now you should be able to check to make sure this is done right by squeezing your throttle handle. You can take out extra slack by opening this up, but make sure you're watching your throttle control on the engine itself so it's not accidentally staying revved up. And hooking up the magneto, we're using the wiring harness. We're going to slide this and open it up. So here's our hot coming from our engine, being spliced here, running through to our oil sensor, onto our on and off switch, and to a ground on the engine. We're going to open this up. It just comes apart like this. Pull these apart gently. If you want to put a little piece of heat shrink, you can put it on here. take the wire that's coming from the oil sensor and our splitter that came with the wiring harness, snug it up in there. Go ahead and crimp this. Slide on your heat shrink. Heat gun. Our hot from our magneto kill switch goes into one of these. And from the engine goes into that one. We take this bolt off here with an 8mm socket. I'm going to use a small flathead to pry this back just a little bit. Now I can take the ground from the engine's on-off switch and run it alongside direct contact with the ground from the kill switch and reinstall the 8mm bolt. On your kill switch, you'll find the letters M and I. We're going to be plugging our connectors into the M's. I don't believe it matters which goes to which, because it is just a kill switch. So it's cutting the connection that this creates when we press the button. Remove the plastic nut, mount it in the direction that you want. Remember, this gets clipped to your body when you're operating this, so if you fall out of the boat, it dies. And I'm going to take some electrical tape to tape down these leads. Now that I have the motor set up, I'm going to take this 27mm nut, I'm going to loosen it, and then I'm going to add some Loctite. Add some Loctite. Don't want to lose this guy. I'm not going to torque this, I'm just going to tighten it enough. Make sure that I still have the movement that I want. So the only thing we have left to do is grease everything up. So grab your grease gun. So if you remember, we filled this coupler a third of the way full of grease when we put it on. So this is our very last thing to do. Let's fill it the rest of the way up, and then we can start this baby up. Oh yeah, I painted that sucker. Check out the link in the description below. Giving her a full synthetic 10W30 half quart in this Predator 212. Fill her up with your favorite corn-free gasoline. That'll kill ducks. Good boy. Good boy. Show me. Good. Good boy. We got a woody. Come on in.